The sun was setting on a quiet suburban evening in Oak Ridge Estates, a pristine neighborhood just on the outskirts of the city. With its manicured lawns, over-polished streets, and a collection of carefully curated homes, it was a place that prided itself on order. And for most of the residents, that order was upheld by the unyielding grasp of the HOA, the Homeowners Association. Megan Harris had lived in Oak Ridge Estates for 10 years. She loved the peaceful suburban lifestyle. Her home was a small, two-story house with white picket fences, a perfectly trimmed garden, and a porch swing where she could watch the world pass by. It was the kind of life she had always dreamed of. That is, until Karen Weston came into the picture. Karen Weston was not just your average neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge Estates, or at least she thought she was. With her bright blonde hair always perfectly styled, her oversized sunglasses, and her disdain for anyone who didn't share her obsession with the neighborhood's rules, Karen had managed to climb the ranks of the HOA board, quickly becoming the president. Megan first encountered Karen when she had dared to plant a rose bush in her front yard. It wasn't part of the HOA-approved landscaping guidelines, but Megan had felt it would add a little color to her otherwise beige landscape. When Karen knocked on her door to deliver the notice of a fine, it was as though the world had come crashing down. "Megan, dear," Karen had said, with a sugar-sweet tone that never quite reached her eyes, "I understand that creative tastes, but that bush? It simply doesn't fit in with the aesthetic of the community. I'll need to ask you to remove it immediately, or you'll face a fine." Megan had been taken aback, but she was too polite to argue. The HOA rules were the HOA rules, after all. But she'd also started to see Karen for what she truly was, a woman with a need to control, to dictate the lives of others, and now she was beginning to regret it. Karen didn't stop there. No, that would have been too simple. Megan had learned that Karen's version of community involvement meant enforcing every petty rule with zero tolerance. From color choices for the exterior of homes to the exact height of grass blades in the front yard, Karen had her finger on the pulse of every home in Oak Ridge. No one was exempt from her watchful eyes, and Megan was no exception. It all started with the garden gnomes. Megan had bought them on a whim at a local flea market, two little gnomes she thought would bring some whimsy to her front yard. She placed them carefully near the flower bed, thinking they added a quirky touch. Within a week, Karen had knocked on her door again. "Megan, darling," she said, this time with a little more frost in her voice, "I've had several complaints about the garden gnomes. They're simply not classy enough for our neighborhood. I'll have to ask you to remove them by the end of the week. We can't have things like that giving the wrong impression." Megan wanted to scream. The gnomes, harmless little things, were no threat to anyone. But she smiled through gritted teeth and complied, as always. It wasn't long before Karen's reign over Oak Ridge turned into something more sinister. The latest incident involved a simple family gathering. Megan's husband, Matt, had invited a few friends over for a barbecue, and they'd been playing music in their backyard. Nothing too loud, just enough to enjoy the warm summer evening. They were outside, grilling burgers and enjoying the fresh air, when Karen showed up at the gate. "You're being disruptive," she declared, folding her arms with an expression that suggested she had a personal vendetta against anyone who dared have fun. Matt, usually a laid-back guy, stood in disbelief. "It's a Saturday afternoon. It's not even 7 p.m. yet." Karen wasn't having it. "This isn't a party neighborhood. Keep it down or there will be consequences." The warning was just the latest in a series of small slights. But that day, something snapped inside Megan. Karen had crossed the line one too many times, and Megan wasn't sure how much longer she could put up with it. Her resentment had been building for months, and now it felt like the last straw had been dropped into a cup that was already overflowing. What happened next was unplanned. It was something that Megan had only fantasized about in her mind, something that she had often joked about with Matt. revenge. That's when she got an idea. 3 days later, Megan was sitting in her kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone, when she saw it. A post on the neighborhood Facebook group. It was from Karen. "Dear neighbors," the post began, "I've arranged something special for all of us. This summer, Oak Ridge Estates will host a glamping retreat in the park. I've invited over 500 campers for a weekend of nature and community bonding. It'll be an event like no other, just the kind of retreat this neighborhood needs." Megan blinked in disbelief. She couldn't believe it. She had invited 500 campers to the park. The park was a small area, surrounded by the homes, meant for walks and picnics. But 500 people? That was absurd. It was clear that Karen didn't care about the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. She cared about her own reputation and control. "Matt," Megan called, slamming her phone down on the table. "You won't believe this." Matt walked into the kitchen, a concerned look on his face. Megan showed him the post. "I can't believe she's done this," Megan said, shaking her head. 500 people? Can you imagine the noise, the mess, the chaos?" Matt looked over the post, then glanced at her. "We need to do something about this, Meg." Megan took a deep breath. She could already feel the anger rising again, the rage she had been holding in for months. And then, like a light bulb flickering on, an idea popped into her head. What if we could turn the tables?" Megan said, her voice low but determined. Matt raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "We get back at her, in a way she'll never see coming." The plan was simple but effective. Megan had spent years managing a small apiary in her backyard, a hobby she loved. She had a collection of beehives, each one carefully maintained. But Karen had no idea how much Megan loved those bees. In the coming days, as the glamping event approached, Megan began preparing her revenge. Over the next few days, Megan moved swiftly but with care. She didn't tell Matt her exact plan, though he knew something was brewing. He'd grown used to his wife's quiet determination. When she was upset, she'd become almost methodical in her approach to dealing with it. But this, he realized, wasn't just about Karen anymore. It had become something bigger, a fight for her own peace of mind, a stand against the years of passive-aggressive torment from someone who thought she could control everyone's life. The plan was set in motion the night before the glamping event. Karen had made it clear in her announcement that the campers would begin arriving by noon the next day. Megan knew this would be the perfect time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Megan headed into her backyard to check on the hives. Her bees were her sanctuary. The buzz of their wings, the steady rhythm of their work, it was a kind of meditation for her. She spent hours out there, tending to the hives, ensuring that the queen was healthy, that the workers had plenty of space to store honey, that everything was in perfect balance. The bees were a far cry from the chaos that Karen had brought into their lives. Megan smiled softly as she opened the lid to the largest hive. The warm, earthy smell of honey filled the air. She inspected the frames carefully, nodding to herself as she saw the larvae, the bees moving with purpose, the honeycomb glistening in the dim light. She'd been monitoring the bees closely for weeks, ensuring they were ready for this. She had been careful to avoid disturbing them too much over the past few days. But tonight, she would be doing something different. Megan didn't hesitate. She went to the shed and retrieved a large wooden crate, a portable, sturdy box she'd used in the past to transport bees when they needed to be relocated. She'd been preparing for this for a long time. By the time Matt came outside, it was close to midnight. He found Megan in the backyard, her hands gloved and her movements deliberate as she gently slid the frames from the hive into the crate. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. "I'm relocating the bees." Matt frowned. "To where?" "Where else?" she said, her voice thick with a mix of determination and satisfaction. "To Karen's." Matt's eyebrows shot up, but he said nothing. He could see the fire in Megan's eyes, the same fire that had sparked when Karen first decided to throw her weight around. He could see that this wasn't about the bees. It was about making a statement. "Megan, be careful," Matt warned, his voice more of a plea than anything. "I will," she said quietly. "Trust me." The next morning, Oak Ridge Estates looked completely different. The park, normally a tranquil space where children played and families picnicked, was transformed. Rows of tents and brightly colored camping gear stretched out across the green space. The air was filled with chatter, the clink of metal pots, and the sounds of people setting up their makeshift homes. Music played from a portable speaker, but it was nowhere near the pleasant background hum of a peaceful summer day. It was the loud, invasive noise of a crowd that didn't belong. Megan stood at the window of her kitchen, her gaze fixed on the scene. Her